Basically, what happened was that, of course, the United States started this, and if you uh, look at Western media, you'd think it was Iran. And the US government also pretends it was Iran, but they started, as you pointed out, by striking tankers. And they killed a number of sailors. I know that one was killed and a number were missing on one tanker. I don't know what the fate of what their fate was, but the Americans are not. They're just killing innocent people. Just like a few days ago when we had another uh, battle in the near the Strait of Hormuz, they fired on civilian boats, and one person was killed. Initially, they said 5 people were killed, but one person was killed. And by the way, no Iranian boats, military boats, no Iranian naval boats have been hit in the last couple of weeks. I mean, in either of these two naval conflicts were Iranian naval boats struck, not one. U.S. ships were struck, but with drones. The missiles, from my understanding, were fired at them, but mostly to scare them. But drones were fired, and a number of drones did strike the ships. But the drones were intended to do damage, but not to do serious damage. So the missiles were fired not to strike. They didn't plan to strike the ships with the missiles. This is my understanding. But they, because if the missiles struck the ships, then it would have created a new wave of tensions. And Iran right now doesn't want to be seen as starting a new aggression. Well, aggression always starts from the Americans, but Iran doesn't want to be seen as the side that does escalation for a host of reasons. Because the international community wants this to die down, and the Iranians want to be seen as they have been seen to be the responsible actor. So it's preventing any ships from leaving. Ships that are from those 5 countries. Remember, the Strait of Hormuz has never been closed, never, by the Iranians. Ships that are linked to countries that are friendly to Iran or that have not participated in the war in any way or form, those ships go through. So the Chinese, the Russians, Iraqi ships, ships from countries like India and Pakistan, even though some of them, their ships had oil from these countries or LNG from these 5 countries that were part of the war, they negotiated and got some of their ships through. The limitations are for Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. And it's because they fought in the war. They helped the Americans launch murderous strikes on the country, missile strikes, air strikes, naval strikes. So they're partners in crime, and there's no reason why Iran should allow their ships to go through the Strait of Hormuz under such circumstances. So the Americans were trying to carry out this this operation to get ships to go through these ships to go through the strait. They failed. I think that's in itself evidence of failure. So regardless of what happened or how the Iranians struck the American ships or the fact that the Americans just murder, say, ordinary sailors and civilians, at the end of the day, the best evidence to show Trump's failure and the failure of the U.S. forces, despite Western media propaganda, is the fact that none of these ships have been able to get through the Strait of Hormuz.
No. Do you see that it seems that Iran is somehow getting to the point that they have to confront the United States with the case of blockade? They cannot sit aside and see what the United States is trying to hit these tankers. How do you see the escalations, and how far is that going to go? Or maybe, we're going to see, as a result of these sort of escalations, we're going to see the new round of war come in. now soon?
Well, I've said this a couple of times, and I don't want to be like as they used to say, a broken record. I don't want to always constantly repeat the same thing over and over again, at the risk of sounding like what was it, the boy that cried wolf. But Iran is still expecting a major assault, and of course they've been expecting it for quite a while now. I think on the last, probably the last two programs that I was on your show, I said that Iran is is waiting for an imminent assault that could happen any hour, and that's the same as we speak now. The Americans have also their forces in position. They brought in a lot of equipment for ground operations too, and the Iranians believe that an attack could be imminent. So um, the Iranian armed forces are on full alert. But this has been the situation, as I said, for a couple of weeks at least now. I don't know. I'm not good at dates, but yeah. So it could happen before. I mean, logically speaking, you would think, or I would think at least, that the United States would not attack now because the summit between the meeting between President Xi and Trump is on the 14th, if I'm not mistaken, the 13th or the 14th, around that time. And so you would think that Trump would not launch an attack on Iran before an important meeting with the Chinese president, because this changes the equations and it could harm the negotiations. But then again, this is Trump and these are the Zionists. They're not rational people. They're not reasonable people. So, I mean, I just saw a report in Lebanon that these Zionists, they were, it's not completely linked to what we're discussing, but sort of gives you an idea what sort of monsters we're dealing with. A man was on a motorcycle with his daughter, and they were trying to kill him, and he ultimately separated himself and was killed. And then they chased after his little girl and hit her too, and she died in hospital. So, these are the sort of monsters that we're dealing with. They have no humanity, and they have no rationality. They're not reasonable. They don't even comprehend how this is being viewed across the world. This sort of outrageous behavior. I tweeted it. One of the journalists in Beirut explained what had happened, and I just tweeted it, I think, a few minutes ago. But so when we're talking about this class of people, and so it could be, they may not even take into consideration the fact that Trump is soon going to be leaving for China for a trip. But you would expect that they would not attack in the next few days. But the Iranians, knowing that Trump is not predictable and not rational, they are prepared for an attack now.
Just to confirm it again, sorry for repeating my question, but you said that none of those speed boats were hit during these firings, because Donald Trump and the United States said at least 7 of them were hit. And
I mean, Nima, in Iran, marchers cannot be hidden. You can't hide them. They immediately, their families come out, the whole town, their towns, people go to the streets, then people take films of their funerals. You can't, it's not something that you can hide. I mean, I remember during the first days of Syria, when the dirty war began, like in 2013 or so, the first few marchers, they didn't declare them. But then they came out on social media. And so they stopped doing that because it's just not possible. So they didn't hit any of the boats, the naval boats. They did kill a person on a boat that was, I think, taking goods from Oman to Iran, a small cargo vessel. and a number of people were injured. And they targeted a number of fishing boats that went to the aid of that. I'm not quite sure of the circumstances, but they hit a couple of these fishing boats, 2 or 3 fishing boats that were going to the aid of this bigger boat. But I don't think anyone was killed. I think a number of people were injured. But no naval boats were hit.
We've seen the reports by marine traffic that in the last 24 hours, not a single commercial ship passed through the Strait of Hormuz. And on the other hand, the other report that we had on, it was reported on Wall Street Journal that it says that Europe has 6 weeks they're running out of jet fuel right now. The problem is right now because the Strait of Hormuz is responsible to provide 20% of jet fuel. Not only 20% of jet fuel, that 20% of the crude oil that goes through the Strait of Hormuz goes to refiners of the jet fuel as well. You see, the crisis is big, and 6 weeks is nothing when it comes to the strategic sort of reserves for the case of Europe, for example, as it was mentioned in the support of Wall Street Journal. How do you see the situation? Are we, because the United States is talking about they're waiting for Iran to respond to their proposal. When are we going to learn about that?
Well, when the United States strikes at Iran and violates the ceasefire and carries out these operations, then it bombs civilian buildings on Iranian soil, then it should not expect swift responses to its proposals. It's obvious that the Iranians, the West does not comprehend Iran at all. Iran is the opposite of, does the opposite of what they calculate. When they speak with other countries, I assume when they demand quick responses, they get quick responses. But when they demand quick responses from Iran, the Iranians say, "Really? Okay, then stay there. I'll be back," and then they'll go for lunch. So the Iranians are not going to give them the sort of swift response that they're seeking when they are behaving like this and attacking Iran. So I think the response probably would have been handed over to the Americans by now, but intentionally they're trying to make them comprehend the fact that Iran is not intimidated. It's not afraid of another war or a continuation of the current war. Iran is prepared to fight. And I think the world now recognizes what sort of nation the Trump regime is dealing with in this coalition of evil, this Epstein coalition, what they're dealing with. And they know that they cannot defeat Iran. Just like now it's becoming clear that the enemy cannot defeat Hezbollah. In Lebanon, a lot of the political parties last year distanced themselves from Hezbollah, and because they thought that it was a spent force, because they too believed the propaganda, but they didn't comprehend the resilience of these people, of the supporters of the resistance, whether Shia or Sunni or Christian or Druze. The supporters of the resistance are of a different character, and so the steadfastness of these people is something that's unique. And now they're coming to the recognition that they miscalculated, that Hezbollah is indeed a force far beyond what they ever contemplated, a force surrounded on all sides by the United States, through Al-Qaeda and ISIS on the east, U.S. proxies to the north, the Mediterranean, of course, controlled by the NATO and its proxies, and the south is the Israeli regime. But yet, despite that, you see that they're holding their own. They're pounding the Zionists, and the Zionists in their outrage, they slaughter families, they murder kids, they chase kids on motorcycles and that sort of thing, and murder them. So the same is true with Iran. Iran is not going to be intimidated by Trump. If Iran is prepared for a full assault that may take place moments from now. It may take place tonight. It may take place tomorrow. It may not happen, but the Iranians are working on the assumption that it will happen.
We have a new report on Al Mayadeen. It says Iran has detected the enemy, an American destroyer, into the UAE's coasts, and it's monitoring its movements. Professor Mann, the UAE is different from other GCC countries because before this war started, we were thinking that they're all were of the same sort of policies. But as time went by, and since the ceasefire, we see UAE is getting a lot different from other GCC countries. Right now, they're totally connected with Israel. They want to be part of, Israeli sort of mindset in the region and together with the United States. And even with the attacks, 48 hours ago with the attacks, we've seen one of the officials in the UAE giving the directions of those attacks on Iran. Where is UAE today in the mind of Iranian officials, and how are they preparing themselves to deal with this new reality considering UAE?
I think that from the very beginning, the Iranians did consider the UAE to be different from the others. It had more a closer alliance with the Israeli regime. It was so bad that even the Saudis were becoming frustrated with their behavior, and we saw how in Yemen and even in Sudan it began to affect Saudi policy. But you're right. After the war began, some of these countries began to become more realistic. Qatar, after Iran hit it very hard, it began to rethink its policy, and even though it's still a proxy of the United States, there's no doubt about it, and its eggs are in the U.S. Basket, but still, it's more pragmatic in its approach towards Iran now. And the other four countries, except for the United Arab Emirates, or as some in Iran now call it, I don't want to insult, but some say the Abu Dhabi Emirate, but in the Iranians see that the UAE is different from the rest. You're right. It's more the relationship with Israel was much stronger, but the alliance afterwards they're flouting that alliance, and so you have Mossad there. You have the Zionist military presence there. You have direct flights, and they're openly hostile towards Iran, even though Iran didn't start the war. They were a part of the war against Iran. All these five countries are partners in the war against Iran. They have no excuse for what they've done to the Iranian people. But so now the Iranian policy towards the Emirates has changed, and Iran is saying that it's going to start treating the Emirates like it treats northern Iraq. What is northern Iraq like? It is an ally of the Zionist regime. The Kurdish government in Arbil is very close to the Israeli regime. And of course it's close to the United States and NATO, but it's an ally of the Israeli regime. And so it allows terrorist organizations, despite the fact that the Iraqi central government does not accept this, but they use the U.S. influence in Iraq, and especially in northern Iraq, to allow terrorist organizations to open up military bases. There are all sorts of military bases in northern Iraq for terrorist organizations against Iran. And what the Iranians have been doing is that they've been bombing them regularly. And they will continue to do so, because the belief is that once the United States assault begins, these terrorists will move into Iran from northern Iraq. That is the plan. And also terrorists from the border with Pakistan, the the Wahhabi terror organizations that are funded by Western agencies that regularly carry out attacks near the Pakistani border, that they will launch an assault from there, and that these terrorists and Kurdish groups, but also others, will launch an attack from northern Iraq as the United States and the Israeli regime bomb Iran and probably bomb Iranian critical infrastructure like electrical power plants, and that is what they are saying may happen in Iran. Well, that is what Iran is preparing itself for. So as we speak, they're striking these terror groups in northern Iraq. But of course, if this actually happens, Iran will start striking Erbil itself and the government. They'll bring down the government, and the Iraqi resistance will target the government too, because Iran will no longer tolerate a Kurdish pro-Zionist local government in northern Iraq anymore after this, if there's such an operation launched against Iran. But that policy is now being expanded to the UAE. And so the Iranians basically are saying that in future, if we see any threat to Iran from anywhere in this territory, we will strike. That's a big change. Now, I think your audience should know that this is the third war that's launched against Iran by the West and its proxies. The first was in 1980 with Saddam Hussein being pushed by the Americans, and these countries in the Persian Gulf gave Saddam hundreds of billions of dollars back then. At that time, Iran's relations with the Emirates were the best of all these countries, and it remained that way for 2-3 decades. But now, ever since the Emirates has chosen to become an ally of the Israeli regime, Iran's relationship with the Emirates the UAE has become the worst of all these countries, alongside Bahrain, which also shows a very harsh, a great deal of malice towards Iran, the regime. But the Bahraini regime is not that significant. It's not very important. But the Emirates, they do conspire a lot against Iran. And a lot of the forces that have been brought into the region, they are based in the Emirates, the land forces, in Kuwait, the Emirates, and Bahrain. And the air forces, the air power, a lot of them are in the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and in Qatar.
Yeah. Bahrain has resumed its crackdown on Shia Bahrainis, and considering that more than 70% of Bahrain, the population is Shia Muslim, and how significant is that for the region, and how does Iran see the situation in Bahrain? Is there any way to improve the situation for these people in Bahrain?
Well, right now, anyone who supports the resistance is in serious trouble. In Syria, for example, you have people from different ethnic backgrounds, religions and sects, but who are under a lot of pressure. Anyone who supports the resistance is in trouble. The same is true in across the Persian Gulf region. But it's not just Shias right now. Overwhelmingly, except for the Wahhabis and the Salafis that are funded by these dictatorships. I mean, Qatar is a Wahhabi regime. That's an official ideology. And the same is true with Saudi Arabia, even though Mohammed bin Salman has distanced himself somewhat from it. But except for them, people on the streets are supporting the resistance. I mean, I have friends in Kuwait who are not Kuwaiti and not Muslim, but they say that the local population, they all support the resistance. I mean, I don't know. He says all. So, a friend of mine, he says, people support the resistance. So I think that the sectarianism and the divisions that the artificially created divisions where Wahhabi and Salafi groups funded by these regimes have been trying to divide people across the region um, through sectarianism. That is now that project is falling apart. The project to divide people by sect, by religion, by race, that is collapsing. And from what I'm hearing from across North Africa, the Maghreb in particular, Egypt, but also even in these countries, including Kuwait, support for the resistance goes beyond sect and religion. It is very strong.
In this new proposal of the United States, Professor Marandi, we know what is happening in Lebanon, and Hezbollah is just fighting the Israeli aggression, and they're trying to do their best to force Israeli forces out of Lebanon, the southern part of Lebanon. On the other hand, they're amazing. Yeah. And we had, the Prime Minister of Lebanon going to Syria. Looking at the situation in Lebanon, how important in this new proposal, the negotiations between Iran and the United States, we know that Iran, each and every time with that 10-point plan, then 14-point plan, the first point was putting an end to the war on all fronts, which includes Lebanon. Is that the case?
Well, what the Lebanese government wants is the defeat of the resistance. And let me give you an example. There are lots of refugees, and they're trying to strangle them financially. So they don't even let financial support to go from Iraq or other places, not just Iran. And when the refugees they were going to set up a place for 3,000 refugees, and then they stopped it. And they said, no, these refugees cannot come to this part of Lebanon. So they're trying to make the resistance and the supporters of the resistance, the communities that support the resistance, suffer financially to bring them to their knees and to bring them to despair. But they're a steadfast people. So the Lebanese prime minister, the president, they're the enemies of the resistance. They're American proxies. And of course, the same is true with the Al-Qaeda regime in Syria. So as I said, the resistance is surrounded, but you still see this heroic resistance and effective resistance against the Israeli regime. It's against all odds, and people across the world, should be studying this closely, what Hezbollah is doing and what its supporters, the sacrifices that its supporters are. The Israelis are bombing all the towns, destroying all the homes, so that all the supporters of the resistance would have no place to go. They've destroyed their shops. They've destroyed banks or all means for them to gain to have access to money. They want to starve the resistance, and of course, this is a coalition of evil. The prime minister, the president, the United States, NATO, U.S. proxies, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Zionist regime, of course. Yet despite that, Hezbollah has the upper hand. It is truly amazing. It is just what Iran has done to the United States in this heroic war of resistance. This, a war of resistance that, let's be very blunt. Even our friends across the world didn't think we would survive. Many of them, at least. I have many friends who, after the war ended, sort of said to me, I was afraid that the country would collapse, and lots of people thought that it wouldn't last for more than a few days. Now their views on Iran have changed. You saw what the Iranian foreign minister said when he was returning from China, that the Chinese said that the stature of Iran in the world has risen significantly after the war. The same is true with the entire axis of resistance.
Seyed M. Marandi's analysis on Iran's response to the U.S. blockade reflects how rapidly tensions in the Middle East are escalating. The interview presents Iran as unwilling to back down under pressure, while portraying the blockade as a dangerous move that could destabilize the entire region and global economy. From my perspective, this situation shows that confrontation and sanctions are only pushing both sides further toward escalation instead of diplomacy. Whether people agree with Marandi or not, his comments highlight a growing belief in Iran that the country must resist external pressure at all costs. At the same time, the possibility of wider conflict in the Persian Gulf would have consequences far beyond the region, especially for energy markets and international security. The discussion also raises important questions about media narratives, geopolitical interests, and how global powers are shaping public opinion around the conflict. In today's world, understanding different perspectives is more important than simply choosing sides. What do you think about Seyed Marandi's statements and the growing tensions between Iran and the United States? Share your personal opinion in the comments.